right, welcome back. You guys are tuned into the Chappie and Bengals podcast. This is Tuesday, January 14th. Today we're going to be recapping the wild card weekend in the NFL. Chappie, your bracket was looking pretty good.
It was looking
Mine
good.
was absolute garbage out of the gates there. So that's going to be fun to review. And the Rams saved my tail there at the end, but rough start. Rough start. You always want to come out and be like, yeah, things are going to change, but that's not the way it goes. It's pretty straightforward. So we're going to dive into this, start with some headlines here. Biggest thing being some of the coaching changes that we got going on. I want to get your thoughts on these. So big one in New England, Mike Vrabel hired in. I think we all expected this, but let's kind of get your thoughts here, Chappie, initially on New England, bringing back a familiar face in Mike Vrabel.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. I think that's the right. It's funny. There's a gap of why that didn't happen the first time that I think is questionable, and I think maybe that is just why they did it. Maybe it wasn't the right time and the right moment, and just wait on that. Now you have a little bit of some substance to work with, and we just said, I don't think there's a whole lot of substance. I really don't think that this team is too far along. You got a couple cornerstones that you're going to build upon, but Vrabel's definitely the guy to bring back to this organization, to bring a little bit of that, that history, that element where, winning culture and all that stuff that was there. And it's definitely a big step in the right direction. I think that is what they need. Now, my curiosity will be, how big is this leash? How long is this time? Because clearly you thought the direction was going in one way with Mayo, and that came up really, really short. So I think Vrabel's going to have a bit more of a leash with the history with the organization. But just kind of funny. I think it's the right call. I think it's the right move. It's where he should have gone. Absolutely. As soon as that happened. So, what's your take?
Well, the first thing was Vrabel was available last year.
He was right at that time. Yep.
He was available. Now, was it because they had this whole plan of grooming him, and you're not going to be like, well, fuck that plan. Vrabel's available. We're going to go get him. I don't know. But then I look at it too, and you have all this nonsense surrounding the Rooney Rule and stuff like that now too, right? Which absolutely agree with doing that kind of stuff. The way it's deployed though, it seems like it forces people to just do it for the show aspect of hiring people of color and getting them in there for interviews, and they just they check their boxes, yada yada yada, right? Don't know what it came down to with Mayo, what Robert Kraft was thinking after that season. We talked about the expectations. Do I think Mike Vrabel's a much better head coach? Absolutely. And just a leader of men. He knows the game. He's been on successful Patriot teams. I don't know how many Super Bowls Mayo has won, but I know Vrabel was there when they were peak New England Patriots dynasty. And then I look at, is Robert Kraft and these guys, are they just trying to relive this whole Patriot way thing, right? Are they trying to force this crap again? They just want to relive the glory years and they're trying to bring this back when, football's changed. It's not the same as it was. But I look at Vrabel and I go, to me, he was very successful in Tennessee where he didn't have a quarterback. He had Ryan Tannehill. Now, mind you, he still had a talented defense. Derrick Henry, one of the greatest running backs of all time. They still had a good team. And he had success. He took that Tennessee team to a 1 seed, right? So it seemed like a no-brainer from a New England perspective. And
So what do you think the win total is? We talked about 4.5 with Mayo at the helm and the team as it was. What do you think the win total will or should be under Vrabel? What do you think that
I'm gonna need a lot more information for that, because
you're gonna need an extra player. You need to know what that fourth pick is.
It's funny you mentioned that, because Jamal he messaged me back. He's just double or nothing on the 6.5 win total, and I'm just like, buddy, you want to lose more money again? I need to see what these guys do first. That was an easy bet last year because they deployed a team with nothing there.
Yeah.
We kind of knew how this season was going to go for them. Now that you got Vrabel at the helm, you got plenty of cap space. You understand you got a quarterback that's going into his second year, which is generally where these guys peak, right? This is where they start to pick it up. You got to surround them with talent, and that's obvious. So with the cap space they have, the draft capital they have, I expect this team to be a lot better.
Yeah, I don't know about
it depends.
It can get better. It can also get worse. So we just saw it with CJ Stroud where things actually kind of decline.
To get worse, man. New England hasn't done shit.
Yeah, it's not. I'm not gonna say it's gonna get worse by any means, but it may not take that step fully forward. I don't know what the expectations of this Washington team were initially before obviously getting in Jayden Daniels, right? I think that step took that extra step forward, and obviously we saw what that meant great fucking team to watch. It's exciting, and obviously it's going to continue to get better as things go along here. And I think you also don't necessarily want to peak too soon in that development either, right? Like there is a stage of next year should also kind of be one of those down years if you really, really want to kind of build out this team's foundation.
If you do this properly, that should be the expectation.
I don't think you want to take this to be a playoff team necessarily right away next season. So probably that 6.5 is right where you want to sit if you're a New England fan and you want to kind of build and develop, and you'll probably still get a good pick in the situation and figure that out. As we know how these teams work, right? Like you don't want to shoot too fast. Like I honestly think the pieces were there with Washington already. It just needed that supporting lever, right? And that was what Jayden Daniels was to that team. So
let me ask you this. When you look at the Washington team, just to kind of bounce off topic here quickly, everybody was talking about Caleb Williams. This was the best situation that a rookie quarterback was going into. And then you look at the Washington side of things. I thought they had made tremendous moves in the offseason and what they did. But what would be the difference in like the lack of success with the Bears team versus the success that Washington's had? And
arrogance?
I don't think you can attribute it just to quarterback play. I think there's a little bit more to it, but
yeah, well, what did we really go with, right? We had said Rowan Dinze was probably not the best pick in that slot as well, right? Keenan Allen was a veteran piece that you add and hopefully build upon what you brought in. But I think there was an element to Chicago that wasn't quite there as much either. Like, I don't think we weren't sure what Chicago was at the beginning of the season. Like, that was both of our takes, was that this offense could be great, but we weren't entirely sure of that. And Caleb would be the deciding factor. Turned out he was the deciding factor in a lot of ways, just with how this team kind of operated. So that and just the absolute hectic bullshit that happened with the coaching and the coordinators and all the shit that happened throughout the season. So not a great, I want to say, 1A, 1B. You got a full season out of Mayo, and that turned out to be what it was, and they made that decision. There were a lot more tumultuous bullshit that was happening in Chicago as that went along. In terms of Washington, I think Washington had a good wide receiver one, just had been kind of untapped, right? We talked about Terry McLaurin and his potential for years and years and years. They made some moves with Dotson kind of moving off. There were pieces and plays that were made that were already kind of supporting and kind of built this around. And the dynamic was kind of fed into a running quarterback, right? And I think that's how they really built their system. So the same thing that happened with Harbaugh and Lamar was the same thing that they did with Washington in their systems. So I think that builds the foundation after that. But I think are you building to Drake May's play style now? And are you going to run forward with that? Is Mike Vrabel the right guy? So that's going to be the big question.
Yeah. So when I kind of look at those two teams and I look at the success, like, look at the staff, man. Like, Washington brought in a guy that's been successful, Dan Campbell. We talked about coaching, how important it is in this league, and just the lack of good coaches. And I think do I think Jayden Daniels is a better quarterback than Caleb Williams? I think so. And I think he's proven that, even with the coaching that he's had. But like you have Dan Campbell, and then you also got Cliff Kingsbury, who's been a head coach in this league as the offensive coordinator. Like, you got guys there that have had success before, right? And they've put together a good team. They brought in veterans, and it's produced. And then you look at the Bears side, you got a head coach that hasn't done anything from a head coaching standpoint. And you got a rookie quarterback who's touted to be some great. And you just situationally, it's the same thing I argue with Zach Taylor of the Bengals. Like, that stretch of games where they were losing by one score, like, it was a lot of bad decisions, right? Situational play calling. Detroit one, obvious, stuck out. That was brutal. And I think that's kind of what it came down to. And you look at the success from Jayden Daniels, and that's it. Yeah, so then I guess the next thing we want to look at is the Mike McCarthy being out in Dallas thing.
Yeah, that's fucking crazy. But also makes perfect sense. Like,
it does.
It's like all the shit that's coming with that. And like, this has been for so long an opportunity that could or should have happened. And then all the conversation, you just never know what Jerry's thinking. And honestly, to be fair now, how can you trust what Jerry's thinking? Like, anything that he's saying at this point, this is our guy, this is not our guy. And then on the flip side, he's going to go against that in so many ways that he goes for it. And so now you're like, well, what like you just said, Mike McCarthy, you love the way he was coaching, and then you come through and like I genuinely don't know what the fuck is ever gonna happen. It is a circus, man. Like that, I don't understand. Like you can't be that involved. Sorry, man, you can't be that involved. It's just what it is. Like
Has it worked?
I don't. Has it worked?
No.
Maybe in the early going when you were finessing different
Jimmy
deals,
fucking Johnson,
and you had
like,
Jimmy
guys who knew what
Johnson,
they were doing.
and like what I don't understand that level of like I just don't get it. I've never understood this, and
Ignorance.
it's like it's a sideshow, man. Like it's you've made your opinions on football way bigger than they are, and your team has suffered as a result. So it's crazy to me.
Yeah, it's dude. If you're a Dallas fan, like I feel bad for you guys, honestly. Like, I think you said it best, circus. Like, that is a circus over there. I do not see that getting any better. And you know what the scary thing is? Like, we all talk about Jerry and this and that. Like, that's getting passed down to his kids. Like, how do we expect this to get any better? So,
yeah. Well, that's a funny thing. Like, we think about owners and, like, high-profile owners, and, like, New York Yankees come to mind with, like, Steinbrenner. And, like, just that organization and that culture and the ownership and all that kind of stuff. And then that passed off to the kids. But it's not like they didn't hire a GM. It's not like they had that GM involvement. They're still a part of the organization. They're still going to be part of these decisions. The owners of the Mets, like, same thing. They want to be a part of these things. But they still rely on their baseball operations to run this shit. And I feel like that has just been completely ignored when it comes to Dallas. It's fucking wild. Like, it's just like, just every single decision you have to be a part of. And it's crazy to me.
Every year, it seems like.
Yeah. It is.
He keeps doubling down on this, and it's like, dude, you gotta let it go, man. You have to let it go, and it's getting bad. Like the way he just handled that exit by Mike McCarthy. Man, if you're gonna fire the guy, let him go. Let him go get some interviews done. Let him get in there when when everything is hot and ripe, and all these guys are looking for coaches. Talking about retaining him, and then you let him go like a couple weeks later. Like, what? Like, why are we doing that, man? Like. And the way they handled the Cooper Rush and, like, the bonus with the contract. Like, I don't know the complete facts on that, but, like, man, if you screwed a guy out of his bonus just by sitting him at the end of the year there, like, it's crazy to me. It's some of these decisions, I'm shaking my head now, more so than not with the Dallas Cowboys. And it's tough to look at, man, going into this next season. But that's kind of some of the coaching things that we got going on. Dan, man, I can't wait. Like, the offseason in football it's beautiful. It's absolute cinema. I love it. There's always something going on. Offseason is going to be great. It's just as much fun as the regular season to me. So watching all this coaching stuff happen is going to be really cool. Yeah. I'm excited to talk about
draft, coaching, everything that comes around with this. I think the funniest thing is, and we can kind of use this as a segue to get into some of the games that we obviously just watched over Wildcard Weekend. But,
yes, sir.
The value that changes overnight in this fucking league is incredible. It is awesome. Incredible. Like the fact that we went from a coveted starter in fucking Darnold gonna be making $50 million. We're going right there right away. $50 million projected, $40 to $50 million in that range. You're gonna then go from a $10 million 1 year option, fucking 40 to 50, pay your ticket, and overnight. That just fucking, like, you can tell every fucking sack this guy was just losing a couple more. That's a couple million. That's a couple million. Every fucking time that this was happening. And I guarantee you, he's like, fuck. Like, this is like, I'm losing my lottery ticket here. Like, for everything that's happening right now. And O'Connor tried to fucking save him in the press conference. Yeah. Body of work, Pro Bowl, 14-1, first person to do that as a fucking new team. Like, I was dying because I'm like, you pumpkin. You went fucking full-blown pumpkin. Like, it was, and we can break it down and definitely go through it. But
we will.
Holy shit. I was just like, man, how, like, depressing that must be to be like, hey, I'm on the ultimate fucking high horse, right? Like we were saying, what does San Fran do next year? And that contract for fucking Purdy and all that situation. And you're going Darnold or Purdy. And is that conversation worthy and valid? I think it still is, but every single sack that occurred in that game and why and watching it, and as things broke down around, you're like, throw the ball, man, fuck. It was like pitiful to watch. Like they played him well. They got under his skin and they kept running different things and he just wasn't picking it up. And the last week before this, I said, I think he still had some good reads. There was a point in this game, roughly in the fucking, like, I want to say 8-minute mark of the first quarter. This guy had shit coming back. There was a little dialed in moment. There was a drive there and I was like, okay. We were texting. We were like, yeah, I think he's sorting this shit out. Hope he does. It'd be great to see the Vikings take this. And
That
boom.
was like a fumble for a touchdown or something like that. It
Most
was like,
winningest franchise
fuck.
to never win a fucking Super Bowl. Incredible. I was like, that's awesome. That's the most Viking shit I've ever seen in my life.
yeah, football's fucking. It's so unforgiving though.
Unforgiving.
Like, you have a season like that, and then you're done. One game and you're done in the playoffs. And not only that was the first time a wild card team has had a record like that. And then to go into the Rams' neutral site, not even the Rams' home stadium, and to just get your
and
shit
they said there was
in.
potentially more Vikings fans than there was Rams fans in that stadium.
Yeah.
So
that's remarkable to me. That is
crazy.
just remarkable. I mean, we're already on this game, so we might as well just dump it all on the table here, get over it.
Yep. Also, what the fuck, Vikings? Like, my bracket was literally reliant on a perfect bracket and wild card weekend.
It's the same reason I took the Rams, man. You just look at what McVay is as a coach, what the Rams have done, and the Rams are good in these spots, man.
They're
Stafford's a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Yep.
Like, they're that defense, and we talked about Sam, but let's give the Rams defense some props here for what they did and the pressure they brought. But
absolutely.
That is
a huge factor. Huge.
After watching that Lions game the week before, I think they pretty much figured out, all right, we're just going to bring the house at Sammy Boy here, and we're going to get pressure in his face, and we're going to get him off his game and out of rhythm. And they couldn't even get the run game going because they were just bringing it, man. And then they double cover Jefferson this little more, and they were just giving him problems. He could not make throws. He had open receivers at times that he was missing wide open. He just couldn't maneuver the pocket very well. He was struggling. You could see it. The turnovers. He was uncomfortable, and man, like.
You could tell he was just in spots in the pocket where it was like, that's where the maneuverability of a lot of these quarterbacks that we were talking about matters, right? Like, you have to make a good decision and get out of that at different points. And that was my biggest takeaway in that game, was that there was no breaking out and scrambling at all. It was just crashing around him, and he stuck it out like a fucking person in a fucking house on fire. Like, it was just like, no, this is fine. Well, I'll get it out. Like, no, you won't. Start to fucking run and get out of this situation and try to make a play out of it. Give your receiver some time, and just didn't even try. Like, we can look into the details on it, but the scramble efforts were just non-existent. It crashed around him, and he just committed to it. It was like, once a hand got on him, it was done. But I will say, that game, the call that we both talked about, and that incomplete pass was absurd to me. Do not.
Which one?
Matt Stafford. Literally the game-changing play. If they score in that situation, that game is completely different.
But he threw the ball, man.
In what case?
Albeit it was in such a weird manner, but you could see that motion.
It's still
you could tell.
So either this has to be
is no forward motion.
Sure.
That had forward motion. So
and the most like fucking shuffle pass, anything, intentional grounding, any of this shit.
There was a receiver right there.
I get it. That's so fucked. It's such a veteran move. Matt Stafford's a god at this point.
I told you. I was like, I don't think you understand how hard it is.
Oh, that's incredibly hard. But if I'm a situation now as a quarterback and I see that as a fucking benchmark, I'm contorting my fucking wrist to do every fucking maneuver to get this ball in a throwing motion.
You better be careful, because if you're playing the wrong spot against the wrong officiating crew, you're probably not.
And it will probably go the other way because it's just so fucking stupid. Rules analyst was like, "Yeah, I think this is a throw," and I was like, "Yeah, it could be."
Yeah, like that's the thing, is you could have argued it a little bit, but you saw like it was a pretty distinct forward motion. But if you just did that with ridiculous. Just the slightest of not
What's
as
the
much,
fumble? Now it's a fumble.
It would be like
then it's a score. And it's crazy. That call there,
it doesn't matter. They had ample opportunities, and it's not even, man, it wasn't even Darnold.
It's a momentum shifter. Yeah, they did. They absolutely would that have changed the outcome? Probably not, because they knew exactly how they were going to attack them. But I just kind of laughed and chuckled to myself, being like, that is such a breaking moment in the game where momentum completely forwards to you. You go on that, you get that touchdown, it shifts. You got to now force pressure on different things. LA's looking at the ball differently. Like it completely altered the trajectory of that game in one motion. And I was like, holy shit. Like, if that goes in any way.
I don't even care if they get that touchdown. Sam can do fucking anything. So
maybe just gets a little bit more confident. Who knows?
did they get to the red zone aside from when they scored the touchdown? That they might not have even gotten in the red zone at that point, because that was like a 20-yard pass or something, I think. They were nowhere near scoring position, it felt like, for the entirety of that game. It was ridiculous.
They got into the red zone once.
Yeah.
In this game. Yeah.
Dude, they were nowhere near scoring position.
Yeah.
I was cheesed because I'm like, for fuck's sakes, Darnold's going to fuck my parlays up again for the second week in a row. Luckily, I cashed out. But, man, I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it, because not only did he fuck the Minnesota Vikings side of things, but when the game gets out of hand and then the overs, they start, because the game is so out of hand, you're not getting those extra throws. Like Puka, they stopped. He was injured. They're just like, we're not throwing this guy the ball anymore. And I was just like, yeah, okay, I've seen enough of Sam. That's it. Let's wrap this up. Let's get this guy out of the playoffs. Let's move on. But fuck. So what do you do now? What's your next move?
82 yards. We're giving up on sacks. 57 on the fumble return.
Offensive line needs a little bit of work. Like we talked about, Darrisaw's been out, but they got manhandled the last 2 weeks. Sam hasn't been great. Coaching wasn't, I don't know if it was helping either, because when I kept watching their plays, I'm like, first down run, 1 yard, if that. Second down play action, pressure in his face. It was just so predictable, and I talked about the lack of motion with some of the receivers on their side of the ball, and I just didn't see a lot of creativity through what they were doing, and it was pretty flat. So.
It's honestly funny. So they played pretty much the exact same game. So kind of getting some stats here. So 22 carries apiece on both sides, 106 to 90 rushing yards, 4.8 to 0.1. The better of that scenario was actually on the Vikings. So
from a rushing standpoint?
And
the
then
Rams didn't even run for the first little bit.
They didn't, and Kyren was
rushes
I don't even think that
halfway
total.
Through the game.
Yeah, and then just in general, the biggest thing was obviously the passing, right? It was completely different from just the efficiency side of it. So 4.1 yards per attempt, 7.5 for Stafford, 10.6 per completion. Obviously, touchdowns matter, interceptions matter, but the sack percentage was massive in favor, obviously.
McVay fucking knew, though. I told you. I'm like, he knows if you come out hard, and that's exactly the Rams, I would say they lean on Kyren, quite a lot.
Absolutely.
Throughout the season, and the stats show that. They came out, and it was pass, like I said. That had to be the least amount of rushing attempts from Kyren Williams all season long, and they got down there, they scored, and they wanted to put pressure on that Minnesota team to score, and you saw it paid off, man. They teed off, their defensive line teed off and got in his face, and that was that. It was a wrap. Amazing.
It's actually funny. So the penalties for Vikings they were actually really good. So only 2 penalties, 20 yards, and LA actually had 10 penalties in 95, and it's just the turnovers and the sacks absolutely killed this team. So
insane.
It's crazy.
Wild, man. Wild. And such a letdown for Vikings fans, and that sucks, but
just another one,
Here comes the offseason.
Unfortunately, yeah,
I guess so much optimism, though, man.
I think that's the problem with the Vikings. When we originally posted some stuff earlier in the season, and they're like, "Don't worry, we'll fuck this up," and then they did.
We waited. I kept saying
the wins kept tallying, which was the crazy part throughout the season.
But then you go back, and it's like the game where I saw this on Twitter today, where it was the picture of Sam Darnold being picked up by his teammates, and they got the fucking water, the Gatorade showers going on with him. And it's like, this picture was only 10 days ago or whatever it was. And I was like, holy
Celebrated
shit, that's pretty wild.
A bit too soon.
Yeah. And I mean, we can bounce over to that game kind of as we segue into the Packers here. But funny enough, same thing with the quarterback on this side of the ball too in the Green Bay Packers. A lot of questions to be had. But before I get into the Packers and Jordan Love and we talk about this, and I think you're seeing a common theme, and we're finally seeing this come to fruition here. And there's a lot of speculation, top quarterbacks in the league, yada yada yada. We know who they are now. Mm-hmm. That is solidified. There's a group of 4 quarterbacks in this league that are the best at what they do, and there is nobody else that's relatively close to them, and that is Josh Allen, the Patrick Mahomes, the Lamar Jackson, the Joe Burrow. Nobody is better than those 4 quarterbacks in this league. And I think we've established this now with Justin Herbert falling on his face again, throwing more interceptions than he has all year in his playoff game. And then it was like, wow, what a ride from some of the guys that were arguing to be like top quarterbacks in this league. All right, now going off of that, I want to get your thoughts on one, Mr. Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers against the Philadelphia Eagles here. I think this has made me feel all warm and fuzzy inside because I had not only said before that Jordan Love was a little bit more a product of the system that Green Bay has to offer, but I'm also going to vouch for him in certain scenarios too. So before I dive into that, I want to get your thoughts on this Philadelphia Green Bay game and kind of what was, because there's a couple storylines in this one, and we'll touch on all the aspects of it. But let's get your thoughts first, Chappie, on Green Bay and the abysmal showing, I'd say, against a Philadelphia team that didn't look that great either.
Yeah, number one, this game was awful. Like, I think that's the number one takeaway on both fronts. We were chatting throughout it, and I was saying that, like, I don't know, Philly plays their opponents really well. I do find that. I think it's a good take. However, this team didn't look like they were going very far in the playoffs. If they were to play Green Bay like this, and maybe play the rest of the playoffs like this, I wasn't expecting them. Obviously, in the bracket, I didn't expect them to get past fucking Sam Darnold at this point. Now, that's not going to happen. They're obviously into that contest a bit more along with that, but this team just looked battered and bruised, and honestly, they were able to make things happen. Like, Jalen Hurts didn't have to do a lot in this game for it to come through for them.
Do
a lot at all. Like,
sure.
Literally, like, every part of this game was just like, holy, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, I know you had taken some props on the rushing side of the ball. Like, that's how this team is going to get through. But as far as Jordan Love goes, it really did speak to, just number one, some weapons are not there, but I don't know if we can consider any of like receivers on Green Bay true weapons. Again, one of the most, I would say, balanced receiving core, and that you can kind of go anywhere with it, but it's not like they have a standout or a stud. I picked Jayden Reed, funny enough, 3.5. That came through, and they got obviously out of the game.
On the last
wild.
The game
I was like, hey, fuck, all right, we'll take that.
That was crazy.
But no, Jordan Love is just, I don't know, man. It just doesn't seem, it doesn't seem all there. I can't put my finger on what exactly it is, but it's
he's just not. Listen, he's not. You don't have to put your finger on anything, man. He's just not a top 5 quarterback in the league. Like, it's not hard to figure that shit out. You know who is, and mind you, he's young. Yeah, there's still room to develop, but when I watch him, he doesn't make plays in gotta have it moments. He just doesn't know how to do that shit. So for me,
this is a weird season for Jordan Love. I don't want to put him out behind the dog shed or the fucking woodshed just yet and like finish this off. I just think this was such a fucking weird season for Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers. Like,
they've had success.
They had success, but he also battled, came off of injury, whatever the case. Like, there are some things that I don't want to say are fully and maybe not all the way there, but we were talking about this guy as replacing Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre and the fucking system that they have in Green Bay is fantastic.
That shit the fuck down for sure.
It should come back to, I would say, some fucking normalcy here, but I can't immediately say, hey, this is, this guy doesn't have an opportunity, because he was good out the gate. He did show that this guy is solid. So I can't say that this season is, I'm going to write it off completely, but these last couple games and even the games that we're going through, but like, I don't see him like Jalen Hurts and this guy not in the same conversation based on what the fuck I saw to Jalen Hurts. Like, I'm looking at the two quarterbacks. I'm like, this is about the same shit. Like, what are you going to expect out of this? And then where would you categorize them in the grand scheme of things in the NFL and the league, right? Like,
yeah. Oh, I
don't know what your take is on that.
The most obvious thing for me is like the AFC has all the good quarterbacks. They have the best of the best. Guarantee. The NFC has the best rosters as a whole, and their quarterbacks are just. They're great quarterbacks. They are not amazing, standout, top-tier quarterbacks. Like, I don't know how much more you need to see from Jalen Hurts to understand that, like, and now, mind you, like, teams are built different ways, and it's not just about as an individual who is the best. Like, I know we sit here and we argue these things all the time, but if he takes his team to another Super Bowl and they win, that shit doesn't matter. It's the same thing in Detroit. Like, is Jared Goff a top 5 quarterback? No. But is he doing enough with the roster that he has to win games? And is that all that matters? Yes. But we argued this before. Like, A.J. Brown was on the sideline reading a fucking self-help book. And I think that's all you need to know about how he feels about the quarterback play in the passing game in that offense. Like, to have to ground yourself is fucking wild in the middle of a game.
What was it? Like searching for inner excellence or some shit like that? Yeah.
That book is #1 trending on Amazon right now. It is blowing the fuck up. How amazing is that?
That's awesome.
That's
Good
the
for
greatest shit I've ever seen. This
Yo,
dude is
AJ
reading
Brown
a
should
book
get some fucking
playoff game
publisher stock in that. That's awesome. What a fucking move.
God, man. Some royalties off that? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That was incredible to see. And I sit here and I laugh at it because we've talked about that and the feuds they've had. But like, how can you sit there and be confident about that passing game? Like, what the fuck is going on here?
We said this all season long, I think.
And it's not just a product of we didn't need to pass the ball, this or that. There's a picture surface, the pocket that Jalen Hurts has to throw a ball sometimes.
Yeah.
And my God, if Joe Burrow had a pocket,
it's been one of the
fucking
best offensive lines in the league forever.
Insane.
And
be
we
able
thought
to
it would
make
lose a
throws.
bit more of a step. It didn't really, with Kelsey obviously retiring, but like
didn't lose a step at all.
Not at all. Tush Push still alive and well. It's definitely part of their identity. Saquon has loved it, right? Like there's literally loved it. And
now it just seems like they're getting too reliant on the fact that they have Saquon Barkley. Like when you go up against a team like Detroit, you're going to have to score points. Now, mind you, might be a little easier because Detroit's secondary's banged up, but that's the thing I'm worried about is, fuck, man, where's this passing attack when you need it?
Yeah. No, number one, I think, I lost a parlay based on Devontae Smith's reception, so that's
why I didn't touch any of the fucking receivers, bro.
I know.
Because it's too much of an up and down game.
Yeah.
You don't know who's hitting. I think one of the most trending props out there was like A.J. Brown over 5.5, and I'm like, Jalen Hurts coming back 2 games.
Actually, you know what it was?
Layoff,
it wasn't
no,
Devontae Smith.
You.
I think it was I don't know if it was that game actually. But yeah, it's one of the situations. Like, it's just a bad situation. This game was completely run based. Just fucking wild that it came down to.
And the game script, it scared me because the immediate turnover and the way the game was going, I was like, fuck, this needs to be a close game for these props to hit. But I looked at that line. Saquon was 20.5 rushing attempts. He's demolished that throughout the year.
Yeah.
You got a guy that's come back off a concussion. There's no way that Saquon doesn't get more than this. And I thought that was a layup, that line. And just the way the game went, too, it worked. But it was closer than I thought. Yeah. But it was, I showed you. I just took running backs, man. Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley. That's what these teams have basically been built off of all season. And they cashed. And sometimes it's as simple as that, right? Yeah. It doesn't have to be who's going to be catching the balls here and that. But
so what do you think of this team then going forward in Green Bay? Like, do you think it's an 11-6 team?
I think it's obvious. The team is great, but I'm going to say this right now. You got to stop overpaying these fucking quarterbacks off of one playoff win. Mm-hmm. The Trevor Lawrences, the Jordan Loves, these guys, the Justin Herberts. Herbert doesn't even have a playoff win. Mm-hmm. We saw what happened there. All these guys getting paid big dollars. What makes you... someone has to fucking throw the gavel down and be like, nah, we're not fucking doing that. We're calling your bluff. If you want to go do something else, be on your fucking way. I don't care. And we'll figure it out. But that's the problem. These quarterbacks put them in that position. You're never going to find a quarterback, right? It's hard. Yeah. So then they just pay them. And it's like, dude, no, man. You're seeing what's coming of that. So when I look at Green Bay now,
I'm not sure Green Bay is completely built on the receiving side of this to also maybe give him that opportunity to shine either.
That's the one thing I will say is
they don't have a wide receiver one at all.
Yeah, can we put that shit to bed now? This whole Romeo Doubs, Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed shit, they're wide receiver 2 and 3s.
Yeah.
And that's it. They're never going to be wide receiver 1s in this league. You got to go get one. Especially if you want your quarterback to be good.
I just don't think that the Green Bay has to draft that, right? That's just been their history in this, right?
Well, the free agent market this year is going to be great for receivers, right? So I think you have to address it. You got to get somebody that's just better. You got to help your quarterback out. That's what it's all about is okay, if Jordan Love is this good, we know what he's capable of, you're going to have to make up for his deficiency somewhere by supplementing that with talent. Look at the Dallas playoff game, right? it wasn't a Jordan Love game. Aaron
Yeah.
Jones ran the fuck through them like a hot
That's
knife
true.
through butter, right? It was a run game thing. And what did they become reliant on again this year? A running back, right? And you're going to be able to beat teams when you have a lead because the pressure isn't on the QB. But now you need a fucking top receiver for that team. No ifs, ands, or buts. And I think that's number one priority in this offseason. Josh Jacobs talked about it too. Like, they need a guy. They're going to need to go get a guy. And I think that's the biggest thing, because I don't think Jordan Love is going to be able to win you games with guys like that now. You got to go get that next piece.
Maybe they go get Devontae.
Well, I mean, fuck. I think he was talking about it too.
Yeah, I think that is a thing. Yeah.
Because he's probably not going to be back with the Jets if they tear that all down, right? So that'll be interesting to see. But then on the Philly side of things, I took them to actually go to the Super Bowl and win. I'm not too confident about that after seeing that shit. And I've always watched Jalen Hurts play, and I've just never been impressed from a passing side of things with him. Although, like, when he was in the Super Bowl a couple years ago, he played amazing. I don't know, man. It's weird. I don't know what quarterback I'm going to get.
Yeah, I don't know. They've played the style to which, is built around him. That's why I was with the whole AJ Brown situation. I was like, that's not necessarily this team's game, man. I just don't think that that's been a huge thing. They have the weapons there when they need to play those schemes and those offensive plays, but they're going to rely on the run. They've been relying on the tush push for 2 years now. And it wasn't as big this year, but it's still a big part of their game. Their line, everything runs through this offensive line.
That's all that matters too. Right?
So it's kind of like, to that point, I can get, hey, you're getting paid to be that guy, and now you're reading self-help books because you're like, fuck, what am I doing with my career? I get it. But, holy shit.
To keep himself from going off on the sideline.
I get it. But, at the same time, if this scheme can get you, it obviously all the conversation that was happening through the regular season, and now we're like, hey, this team's fucking doing all right. It can continue to push through this all the way to where they need to go in the NFC, right? And that's where I'm like, I don't know, is this just what this team plays to? So we'll see.
Well, I think people just want to see some consistency. You want to see consistency on both sides of the ball. We know what the run game is with this team. That is their staple. But you want to see the passing game flow with the run game. And that's ultimately what's going to make this team so dominant, is them being able to use both of those things. But next week, they're going to have to play the Rams.
Yeah.
The Rams are rough on the back end of things. They had a lot of success with the pass rush this past game against the Vikings. We just talked about that. Do I expect them to get the same pressure on a Jalen Hurts? Do I think that's their game plan? Maybe not, especially with that offensive line too, right? It's going to be a different game. So that'll be interesting to preview once we get to that. But I want to kind of get back into the earlier games that were on the Saturday, and that first one, which was the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. This was the very first time that I was actually cheering for the Steelers. And I think the funny thing was, and I want to be just real blunt when I say this, you said to me, your bias is showing. And I will forever stand on my bias, because I am a diehard Bengals fan. And I will hate the purple people over in Baltimore all the time, and I promise you that will always be here. So if you're not a diehard fan and you don't hate these teams sometimes, and you can't see the bias, I don't know what to tell you. For Chappie over here, he doesn't have a team necessarily, so he can be a little less biased.
A little central.
I will always be biased. And so this time I was cheering for Pittsburgh because I did not want Baltimore to succeed. Can't stand them. I think that team gets way too much credit for what they are, and I'm going to really need the Buffalo Bills to win this next one for sure. But let's talk about that game, and I think the big thing is the shellacking that Pittsburgh got and how they could not stop the run whatsoever. It was pretty reminiscent of watching my Bengals play defense, and I couldn't believe it. This is a Baltimore team without Zay Flowers, and I didn't know what to think when I watched this game. So what are your thoughts?
I think I summed this shit up perfectly right before, that this team was running into the playoffs without any fucking offensive gift. They were overly reliant on subpar play, and now it's come out all the bullshit that's happening with George Pickens throughout the season, didn't show up to practice on time, all the crap that's coming from that. And you're starting to see the organization has its weaknesses, and it has its fucking, and I don't think that Baltimore was never not going to absolutely run through this fucking team. Like I said it before, and I'll say it again.
Quite
there
literally.
was no shot that the fucking Steelers were going to win this game. And that's why I took it by 9.5. That's why I fucking said Derrick Henry's going to get 20.5 carries. And then Lamar almost got 20.5 carries at this point. Like, it was just so clear as day that this team wasn't with it. The 2-minute drill, as we said before, literally the worst thing ever. I'm like, if that's what you're going to take into the fucking playoffs, good luck with it, because you're not going to be able to support yourself through this, and especially against a defense like Baltimore's has been playing. And the Baltimore offense is just so fucking dynamic. I knew that Save Flowers missing wasn't going to provide any kind of hindrance to the Steelers. The Steelers are just playing fucking terrible. They relied on their D, and now you're going to go. You had made mention of this in like week 6, where it's like, go into a fucking team and you have to play a solid offense, and how is the Steelers going to fare, right? And they've been able to get by with their defense all season long, and they have no offense. They have absolutely no fucking offense. And that was clear as day. Possession in this game was 20 minutes and 27 seconds, 39 minutes. Like, that's absurd. Like 39 minutes of possession for fucking Baltimore. Yeah. You couldn't even sniff the ball, touch the ball on enough on the offensive side to even influence this fucking game. Yeah. So it's
dangerous when you see that.
464 yards of offensive yards for fucking Baltimore. Like, this team ran literally through and around and like just destroyed them. And that's why, like, I know you're big fuck the purple, but like, Baltimore's that team, man. Like, they are that fucking team.
Oh, wait a second now. Wait a second. There is a matchup that this weekend that
I love it. I'm so excited.
Them. And you know what? Not only this week, but there's a matchup right after that, the week after, and we will see. So
I agree.
I'm not giving
the biggest
conversation
for this is getting through that guy in red. And as soon as that fucking happens, then everyone can fucking praise, right? Because then if you've gone through that, it's like getting through Brady, right? And that's the number one thing right now in this fucking league is everyone knows who the king is. And that's the situation. This little these side conversations, sidebars, all this shit, that's why I knew Steelers weren't fucking even part of this. They're not part of that. We just said the 4 best talents in the fucking quarterback realm are all in the AFC. So was fucking Russell Wilson a part of that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So, sorry, I just don't see this offense generating anything. Najee, take a step back. Like, this team's offensive talent, Pickens can't even show up to practice on time. Like, this team fucking doesn't have it right now. And they were relying on their D. And that just got fucking smoked. So, going forward, like, what was it, 8 appearances for Mike Tomlin? Like, nothing to show for it.
So there's a stat that he's on the brink of here. So first and foremost, I think the one thing was Mike Tomlin is the first coach ever in the history of the National Football League to have that many consecutive 500 seasons and that many consecutive playoff losses. First time ever in NFL history that's happened. Yeah. And then the second thing is Mike Tomlin is one more playoff loss away from tying the longest current standing playoff record of consecutive losses, which was my ex-head coach, Marvin Lewis, in the Cincinnati Bengals, of 7 in a row. Tomlin now has 6. So I mentioned this at the start of the year, and I said this. I said this, everyone just, Mike Tomlin this, Steelers that. He's done nothing but be Marvin Lewis 2.0 again and again. And I understand the Steelers and their prestige and what they've done in history. That is not this team and this organization right now. And they need to figure that shit out. Yeah. Because right now, he's on the chopping block. This entire team is on the chopping block for the way that they've just trotted this out. And man, they're in a purgatory right now because I'm telling you, that's the worst feeling, is being in the playoffs and getting kicked out every single year. But not even that. Like, they just flopped into it this year. And that was one of the saddest displays to end a year I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, it is, and it was, and that's why we know what the Steelers team was heading into this, and like I told you, I think your Bengals had a better shot to have a ability to get through this, and just too little, too late.
Fuck yeah!
So the Steelers came out hot and heavy, right? What were they, 3-0? They got those wins. You were the opposite on the other side of that.
We talked about that schedule being fluffy at the start for them and how it flipped. And
it came around, but this is one of those situations where it's not going to be a Steelers as much as it's. I don't know which one hurts more, and you guys can tell us this. Which hurts more, Steelers fans or Minnesota Vikings fans? Because dropping down from first seed potential to 5th seed, then getting bounced, or Steelers running basically 5 losses in a row to get bounced. Got to be I don't know which one it is. Let us know 100%.
Yeah, let us
because
know in the
I want
comments.
to know. I want to know just what hurts more, because it's got it. Like that, Steelers are going back again. And what are they going to do? Run it back and be maybe that team that gets well enough coached to get in and just out all the same? Who fucking
Well,
knows?
look at the common theme, man. You got to get a quarterback. It's a
Yeah.
quarterback-driven league.
So what's the difference here? Because Justin Fields showcased and then got benched enough, I think, to show that there was an opportunity there for his development. And then Russell Wilson's come through and kind of played that, I want to say, like, coaching figure of like teaching and been on the bench here for the full season. And looks like Justin Fields has well, it looks like that he's learned his step. So whether or not do they apply Justin Fields next year and say, hey, this is going to be our guy going into this, and is that maybe a determining factor? Because things were going well. I think they were, what were they, 4-2 when that decision was made?
Yeah, but like, I mean, I just talked about how they had the easier schedule at the start of the year too. I've seen enough of Justin Fields to know that he's just not going to be a great thrower of the football.
Absolutely not.
Like, sure, you can be an electric runner of the football, but how does that fare when you go up against teams that can put up points and you're stuck? Like, you can't run your way out of that. There has to be an element of passing. For me, I would have thought, like, the struggle that started to snowball, I would have got Justin Fields in there at the back end of the season there. You knew you already had that playoff spot clinched. You're rolling in. You could tell, I don't know if you watched the Hard Knocks episodes there, but Russ is a bit of a corny leader. And that's, hey,
Mr.
man,
Unlimited.
that works with some people, but he's giving his speeches, this and that. I'm not.
That's why
seeing
JMO's
that.
never stuck on a team, because it's just like you can't rely on
I don't know
that.
how you're buying
what
into
the
that.
fuck is that?
It works
Yeah.
when they're winning, for sure. But when
Sure.
shit gets tough, the rainbows and sparkles, chitter chatter is just, I don't know. You need a little bit more out of it. And I think when they were going through that, they probably should have turned to Justin Fields. I expected to see a little bit more of Justin Fields in that playoff game. But they got behind the stick so fast that I don't even think they got a chance to even utilize him properly. But yeah, dude, Mike Tomlin, that Steelers organization, man, they got a lot of questions going into this offseason. And man, that's tough. But on the Baltimore side of things, fuck, man, they look good. And I'm initially looking at the lines right here for next week's game. The lines came out, it was Buffalo by 1. And I don't know, right now it's actually at 1 on the Ravens. So we know
That's going to
we know
flop
where the money
all
is.
week. Yeah.
I think the money is going to go to the Ravens, but I will say, Ravens going on the road, I don't expect them to have Zay Flowers. I just don't see them running through Buffalo. I know Buffalo had a hard time at the beginning of the year. They were missing a lot of their pieces. I don't see that happening. I think it's going to be a bit more of a struggle, but it's tough not to take the Ravens with the way they're playing. I just, when I look at that, the first thing I'm looking at is the same thing I said about last game, is Lamar Jackson and his rushing totals. When you lose a weapon like Zay Flowers, look at what they're trying to do when it comes to giving Lamar opportunities with the ball. And his rushing prop right now, it's only at 50 yards, and his attempts is at 8.5. This dude had 8.5 attempts on the first 2 drives. Like, I'm looking at that again. If Zay's out, there's no shot in hell they don't do the exact same thing they just did to the Pittsburgh Steelers and try and run this ball down their throats. 100%.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's how you control the game. That's why they're so dangerous, is they wear you down in this running game, and you don't know how to stop it. So this is going to be an interesting one, man. I'm stoked to watch this game coming up. I can't wait to preview that. But yeah, Steelers got beat down. Ravens look great. So that's wrap on that. Next game we got to talk about here is that of the Bills and the Broncos here, where I think, Chappie, you're over here saying this game was going to be nice and close, and you're going to take that
big old
nice
L.
8 points there with that one.
Yeah.
That didn't exactly pan out the way you
8.5.
wanted to.
And
First drive, would you text me? You're just like, oh, that 8.5, that plus 8 points
juicy,
is going to
baby.
be great. It's
Look at
juicy,
it.
and oh man, we ate.
They
our
got
shit
off
on
to
that
a
one.
hot start. I was like, there it is. And like, you had to be a little bit nervous as a Bills fan to get that right away and be like, fuck. Like, are we going to pull through on this? Yeah, absolutely. We got this. 41 fucking minutes of possession. Bills absolutely stomped the fucking Denver Broncos, and that is what it is.
Shut 'em
They
down.
didn't even remotely get an opportunity to do anything offensively. Like, literally almost half of the offensive plays that the Bills had. And James Cook just ran the ball. Like, they just played a very smart game. They almost refused to throw the ball in the first quarter. Like, and I think
weird.
that was, it was just clear strategy, right? And I think that was the difference
It's a bit
maker
of
on
a
just
sloppy start
establishing
for
it.
Buffalo. It wasn't very
Yeah.
convincing. I didn't know what their plan was immediately, but then Denver just they couldn't do anything.
But then it was kind of like I think we were back and forth at half, and we were like, I don't know, does Denver get back into this? I was hoping, obviously, that they at least got between the 8.5 mark, but then your text back was immediately, I think this is going to go the other way. And then it absolutely fucking took off the other way. It was definitely a big game. They just dominated. I think it just kind of showed, Denver wasn't ready for that moment. I mean, we're obviously talking to Washington, what that meant for their team and their rookie quarterback, but this is it wasn't just the same, and you could tell that there was some presence of playoff history that at least played a role in this, and just making sure that experience came through, and that was the difference maker here. We had mentioned, I think it was from 2015. So this team hadn't seen this light. They've now been a part of it. Hopefully it builds towards something better in the future. But no, this game was just dominated on the ground, and then when it needed to, Josh Allen took over in the air. I think he had 100 yards at half, and it might not even have been that. And then literally, obviously, I think he finished with 278. So I just kind of took over. 272.
Well, I will say, if that was the Bengals they were playing, I don't know if they're still in the playoffs. But I wasn't too convinced by the way they played that game. Sure, they won handedly, but I'm gonna need to see a little bit more out of this team against the Ravens this week, man. And this is gonna be the big test. This is the game. I think matchup wise, the Bills match up well against KC, and then KC matches up well against Baltimore, but Baltimore matches up well against Buffalo. So it's kind of this weird circle of where teams match up. And this is the game that's not the team that matches up well for the Buffalo Bills. It's playing the Ravens. They're going to need to be on their A game this week, because that Denver team was nothing compared to what they're about to see. But Bills are
absolutely
up.
not. It actually probably hurt their chances kind of rolling in, if we're going to talk about, obviously what the Ravens played with the Steelers. Well, that's still a tough defense. And so you're probably going to get an alignment on the defensive side. And if they get through to KC, it's almost like playing 3 back-to-back teams where, you can know that it's going to be a challenge. With what the Broncos just dealt with, that was not a clear challenge. Now they're going to run into this team, and it's going to be 2 different teams altogether. We'll see. Denver Broncos D was nothing to laugh at, especially coming into this. So it's interesting to see that domination, and maybe that comes through again. But I don't think I think we'll either get a high scoring fucking game here, or absolutely a low fucking defensive
I'm looking at the
battle.
Total right now. It's 51.5.
It's
I've seen
expected
enough of
for
these
sure.
51-point games.
Yeah, and then what fuck was this? Every single time under.
I think the weather's supposed to be really cold there too, and we know how Buffalo gets. So this is going to be an interesting one to see. I don't expect it to be a blowout of those sorts. I actually would probably lean towards the under in this game. I think it's going to be more ball control than anything. But this is going to be a good one, man. Fuck, I can't wait to watch this game. But some of the other games here we missed. We got the Chargers and the Texans in that first game, where we're sitting there and we're watching that first bit, and we're like, holy fuck, Texans look awful. They're atrocious. And we're giving the flowers.
Yeah, I was
to the
I was all
Chargers.
on the Texans. I was like, Stroud's going to have a bounce back. Joe Mixon's going to do his thing. They're going to come out and show up. Well, fuck, they did eventually. But that first bit, I was like, these guys are fucking shit. What's going on here?
I couldn't tell what happened.
You could just
the Chargers
tell.
fell apart too. It was weird.
Yeah, it was a weird bridge in the midway point of that game, where it was just kind of okay, this is kind of getting away from the Chargers, and you could feel that.
Yeah.
And it was
They
just
couldn't
kind
get
of
anything
nothing
going.
developing. Yeah, it was just okay,
get
now.
anything going.
And then obviously picks. Herbert keeps throwing picks, and you're like, okay, I don't know. Houston can have that some days. Houston's had those games.
The defense has been pretty good.
Yeah,
and that's kind of been their Achilles heel more so than the offense, right? But
yeah.
For Herbert to throw 4 interceptions, that's more than he's thrown the entirety of that season.
4 picks, 4 sacks. That's not going to win you any games ever.
They just fell apart. They couldn't get anything going, and damn, hats off to Houston. I ended up taking the Chargers. I thought we talked about the trap game, and that was clearly evident. I got
this one
I'm
right.
gonna fade that. Yeah,
got this one right.
But you had
I was actually
early games.
opening up. I was like, fuck, I'm on fire. I'm just calling out all these shots. This is great. And then fucking the last couple games, I'm like, oh, this is shit.
Yeah, and now that we look at kind of where our brackets are at, like I took a couple shots on the AFC side of things, more so in the pursuit of me just wanting to see those teams succeed too. But it is what it is. When you look at the rest of the teams that are left, the 8 teams that are here, I think you would expect majority of these teams to be here. Like at the start of the year, if I told you that the remaining 4 teams were the Texans, the Chiefs, the Ravens, and the Bills in the AFC, you'd be like, yeah, that's pretty spot on. It's probably had the best odds to get there. And then on the NFC side of things, Detroit and Philadelphia, absolutely, that's your expectation. Yeah. And then Washington is the one that would surprise everybody. But you know, at least you got a little bit of surprise. Yeah, except you over there at the playoff bracket. So far, like, you clearly leading with the playoff bracket picks. It's going to come down to the winner. I'm not feeling so hot about my Super Bowl pick again. I should just went with the Chiefs, bro. Chiefs is going to break my bracket, I think. I think that's going to be the determining. Baltimore against Bills might break my bracket. We'll see how this plays out. That's going to be a big one, man. Because if Bills obviously take that, then I had Baltimore going there. So that's already done. And if Detroit maybe gets, who knows? It could be sneaky ass, break it down. Yeah. The Rams have that on their locker room right now with in 2 weeks, and definitely came through for them. These Rams
these
are a
matchups,
sneaky team, man. I can see them beating Philly. I can see it happening. And fuck, I can't wait to watch these games this weekend. It's gonna be a good one. There wasn't really too much out of that aside from that. Shortcomings. It seemed like the Chargers, they were gonna Charger some way somehow, and they definitely did that. But I'm happy to see the Texans roll a little bit. I want to see some momentum going into that game against the Chiefs. That's going to be a big one. I'm not sure what team we're going to get. 8.5 point spread off the bat. First thing I was looking at was like that Patrick Mahomes passing attempts, pass completions line, because I know where he is and what he does. So that's one I'm going to be keeping an eye on. But with the over-under to be 42, if you're saying that Chiefs are favored by 8.5. You don't expect the Texans to score too many points then. So
don't forget against the spread this year as well. This team has not done well. And any game, I don't believe there was only one game that went that high, and I don't believe they covered it. And I think that was the deciding factor. I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to take anything over. I think it was 6.5 for the spread for the Chiefs this year, because they play in 1-score games and they're very tight, and that's been the story all season long. Yeah. So this is definitely going to be a factor again, but we'll see how this plays out. Texans again, they might just kind of shock some people, and I don't think they can pull off this upset. But fuck, what would that be if not for hey, we're going to expect the Bills. No one believes that the Texans are going to win this fucking game, and I think that's just like, what if that happened? I would love to see it. I think it would just be like, throw a fucking wrench. Now Baltimore and Buffalo guys were like, oh my God, we can do it. And all of a sudden, oh my God. It was just like the green pastures of fucking the heaven's gates have opened. Like, we're actually going to make it. We're going to do this.
We don't have to slay the giant.
We don't have to slay the fucking... And then Houston fucking crashes out right after that. We're like, we gave it all we got. We did it. We fucking did it. This was our Super Bowl. They're going to be lifting up fucking Stroud in the locker room, and Kevin O'Connell's going to be waiting there and fucking... My guys. Kidding. Oh, man. Sorry, Vikings.
Wild. Now that's I can't wait to do that preview show now. So we got our last game we got to talk about. We already kind of touched on a bit of it, but Jayden Daniels and the Commanders going up against the Buccaneers. Man, it's pretty refreshing to see a rookie quarterback come into the league and then flip a franchise like this. It's always cool to see. Yeah. I'm happy for Commanders fans getting their first playoff win in a long time.
2009, I believe.
Yeah, and it's funny, you see like Jayden Daniels has more playoff wins than Justin Herbert. Yada yada yada. It's just, that's funny shit to laugh about. But man, they look good. They
played
just
the part.
Situationally good. They're complementary. They do what they need to do. Now, the Buccaneers team, they're a little bit more of a hot mess to me, but they still had plenty of opportunities to win the game. The Commanders, they got everything going their way right now, but do I think they're going to run into a Detroit team that's probably going to squash them? Yeah, probably. So you talked about Houston not having a chance going to KC. I look at that, it's 9.5 spread in that game. I think it's the exact same thing. Like, great story for Washington, but especially for Terry McLaurin. Shouts out Terry McLaurin there. It's a long time coming for this guy to have some success with that team. So hats off to him. He played a hell of a game too. Them going to Detroit, that's going to be tough. Detroit's just going to be humming, man. They're gonna be humming.
Some of these teams that you kind of like, you had talked about matchup wise, right? And I think this is the interesting part about the Washington Commanders in this situation is probably, if any, a team that's going to match up as close to a Baltimore is going to be Washington in terms of play style and what they're going to do. So this is going to be an interesting game nonetheless to kind of walk through, and maybe that spread isn't as far out, and we'll get into this on the preview, but I think Washington is a weird team, and that there can either be a boom or a bust, and they'll shock you, or like they're kind of that feel. So I don't think Detroit loses here, but Detroit is broken, and they're going to have to do some things on defense to prevent runs and quarterback like plays and shit like that. That's going to be a challenge that they haven't really seen all that much of this year. So it'll be interesting. I'm very curious to see what happens.
Yeah, I look at Detroit, and I mean, I don't think their weakness is their run game, like it's their pass game, their pass defense. So is that going to put more pressure on Jayden Daniels and the throwing game? I think so. And I just look at it and I'm like, I think Detroit's just they're going to come out hot, and when they score, if you put points up against a rookie quarterback, it's going to be tough for him to dig out, right?
That will 100% be the game plan. Dan Gamble's just going to try and break through and score early and often, and
that's it. And for on the Buccaneers side of things anyway, like, great season. Sucks to see that come to an end, but I look at them, and Baker's great. He's played great. I think he's going to need Chris Godwin back. Like, you're going to need that complementary weapon. Like, McMillan, your boy, kind of fell on his face in that game. Didn't really help him out too much.
Yeah.
They couldn't get that going.
But they just weren't passing either. Like, they weren't having too much success. Fucking 18 attempts, and they just, like...
Mike Evans was doing it.
He actually was. Funny enough, they were having success, but they were having success through Mike Evans. They were only targeting Mike Evans, basically, for the entire... almost the entire game. I think at one point Mike Evans had like 5 receptions and 62 yards, and the rest of the team had 1 reception, and I think it was like across 3 guys. So I was like, it was just targeted, and it obviously didn't work out. Like, they just didn't really distribute the ball that well. The run game was pretty decent, which is I think where we thought if they were going to have success was going to be through that at different points. But like, I think I had taken Jalen McMillan for like, I think 3 receptions on one of the parlays, just the alts, and like, I don't think he hit that. So just one of those situations. Yeah. So it's like, hey, it is what it is. Always rely on your big boys in these games. That's who's gonna knock you through. So they just didn't have it running, didn't have it going.
Nuts. Okay, so since we wrapped up those games and we look at the slate of games that are coming up, before we get into our previews and anything, Chappie, I want to get your thoughts here on who you think can upset in one of these games going into this what is it, the conference divisional week? This has got to be the divisional week then.
I think the easiest and the most, just the clear cut upset potential here with how the lines are favored right now is Rams Eagles. I think the Rams absolutely have the team to take on the Eagles and give them a fucking run for their money here. Yeah, both with playoff experience. Like, they both have playoff experience, but like, I'll bet on Matt Stafford in this scenario right now more than I'm betting on Jalen Hurts. And obviously the run game, like, I think those two can cancel each other out. Not saying that Kyron Williams is Saquon Barkley, but he's not far behind. And then the receiving, like, is way better utilized, as we know, with LA than it is with Philly. So I think it will come down to defense. And I think right now the Rams defense is playing a whole lot fucking better. And I think that's just going to be a testament. Like, I'm not saying that Philadelphia Eagles is not, coming along here, and they just kind of showcased that a little bit last week. But I think you just kind of look at the summary of this team, -6 in Philly right now. I'm looking more Rams here than anything else. I didn't think the Eagles were going to get past the fucking Vikings, given that state of the complete team. I think we're looking at the same kind of scenario here with the Rams. So Rams might go on a little run. Who knows? I think it's the opportunity here.
That's the one I was looking at too. So I wanted to see where you kind of sat with that opinion. I think the other teams are just a little too tough, like KC, Detroit. Those two teams are just too big.
They're weapons,
too big a
man.
Giant to slay, and I don't.
Commanders, like I said, Commanders is a sneaky upset waiting to happen against the Lions team that's broken in the backfield. Like in the secondary. I think that would be awesome. And we'll see. Like, we've been on the Lions train all season long. We love what this team is. To fall short, this kind of scenario would suck. I have the Lions going to the fucking Super Bowl and winning it. So if this is where it stops, then that's what it is. That's the history of it. But The Commanders are just an interesting team to kind of build, your defense against. So if any team that can maybe shock it, I think it would be them. Everything else here, I don't think, as much as I think the Texans slaying the Chiefs would be incredible, I don't believe that's going to happen. Maybe that's going to come back to bite, but there's just too much in favor of Mahomes having some rest here. This team kind of building out to what they were and just crushing the league. Like the Chiefs are
racing for it.
Yeah, we know what it is. The tidal wave is coming. Just accept it and know what it is, and hopefully fucking someone kills them and makes it happen. Ravens or Bills, hopefully Lions. We'll see.
That's it. Well, we'll get more into that in our preview show. We'll have that out later on in the week prior to the weekend's games here. We appreciate you guys tuning in to this episode. If you guys have any comments, leave them down below. Hit that bell, subscribe. Trying to get more content out to you guys. Chappie, you have anything else you want to say to the viewers before we get out of here?
We're good. Let's roll.
Beautiful. Let's roll. See you guys in the preview. Chappie and Bengals out. See you guys next time.